some of the titles in my library: Chakra Balancing, The Secret Language of Birthdays. That's an astrological perspective on birthdays and signs. Studies in Dream Symbolism, Manly P. Hall. That's an important one that I'll be discussing soon. Shakespeare's Lives, Misquoting Jesus, Deepak Chopra, Great Encyclopedic Dictionary, Eastern Wisdom, that is the Buddha, that is the most ancient form of the Buddha. And this is the same as the infant Christ. We have 2 volumes on Sufism, which is an Islamic sect. The Zohar is a Jewish text. Carl Jung, Man and His Symbols. The Bhagavad Gita and the Tarot. Bhagavad Gita is Hindi. This is the book we are going to take a look at. Carl Jung, Man and His Symbols. In this book, it will give us an extremely interesting perspective on man, the types of man, how they think, how they view the spirit world from ancient cultures till now. (1964). They were trying to give us information on reality as it is. This is Jung. Now, there's a special portion of the book that I would like to focus on. And I'll just flip through here in the meantime to show you some various pictures of what's in the book, so you have a good idea of the type of information that will be presented in the book. The images you are viewing are extremely important to finding out who you truly are. and certain unbelievable truths that they hide from all of us. Let's get to the page. That I am looking for. It is back here. Page 44. I'll read a little to you. The image you're looking at. A witch doctor from Cameroon wearing a lion mask. He isn't pretending to be a lion. He is convinced that he is a lion. Like the Congolese in his bird mask, he shares a psychic identity with the animal, an identity that exists in the realm of myth and symbolism. Modern rationale or rational man has tried to cut himself off from such psychic associations, which nevertheless survive in the unconscious. To him, a spade is a spade, and a lion is only what the dictionary says it is. Now this already gives you a little bit of insight into the difference between the mind or the brain and the mind of certain peoples over others. Let me read a little more. Starting with the second sentence. The primitive, on the other hand, is still aware of these psychic properties. He endows animals, plants, or stones with powers that we find strange and unacceptable. An African jungle dweller, for instance, sees a nocturnal creature by daylight and knows it to be a medicine man who has temporarily taken its shape. Or he may regard it as the bush soul or ancestral spirit of one of his tribe. A tree may play a vital part in the life of a primitive, apparently possessing for him its own soul and voice, and the man concerned will feel that he shares its fate. There are some Indians in South America who will assure you that they are red aurora parrots, though they are well aware that they lack feathers, wings, and beaks. For in the primitive's world, things do not have the same sharp boundaries they do in our rational societies. So, is this witch doctor from the Cameroons pretending to be a lion? Or is there some ancestral link related to shape-shifting, going into different forms, physical forms, vessels, transportation, vehicles, however you see the physical, the temporal? Does the witch doctor actually assume the form of a lion, spirit and soul? Or does he assume the tree, as Mr. Jung suggests? I'll skip over a little bit and read some more important factors. A theologian once told me that Ezekiel's visions were nothing more than morbid symptoms, and that when Moses and other prophets heard voices speaking to them, they were suffering from hallucinations. You can imagine the panic he felt when something of this kind spontaneously happened to him, We are so accustomed to the apparently rational nature of our world that we can scarcely imagine anything happening that cannot be explained by common sense. The primitive man confronted by a shock of this kind would not doubt his sanity. He would think of fetishes, spirits, or gods. Yet the emotions that affect us are just the same. In fact, the terrors that stem from our elaborate civilization may be far more threatening than those that primitive people attribute to demons. The attitude of modern civilized man sometimes reminds me of a psychotic patient in my clinic who was himself a doctor. One morning I asked him how he was. He replied that he had a wonderful night disinfecting the whole of heaven with mercuric chloride, but that in the course of his thoroughgoing sanitary process, he had found no trace of God. Here we see a neurosis or something worse. Instead of God or the fear of God, there is an anxiety neurosis or some kind of phobia. The emotion has remained the same, but its object has changed both its name and nature of the worse, for the worse. So, now, these images are contrasted with beliefs of how the certain ancient people related to the space around them, the physical and invisible, and it parallels it with the current modern philosophical view. Let me read some captions. St. Paul, struck down by the impact of his vision of Christ in a painting by the 16th century Italian artist Caravaggio. Javanese farmers sacrifice a cock to protect their fields from spirits. Such beliefs and practices are fundamental in primitive life. In a modern sculpture by Britain's Jacob Epstein, man is seen as a mechanized monster, perhaps an image of today's evil spirits. This is a book from 1960s, and it is stating a clear revelation from what used to be and what still is real to the fallacy, to the unreal. When we really consider this contrast, what does it tell us? Let me read a little more. I recall a professor of philosophy who once consulted me about his cancer phobia. He suffered from a compulsive conviction that he had a malignant tumor, although nothing of the kind was ever found in dozens of X-ray pictures. "Oh, I know there's nothing," he would say, "but there might be something." What was it that produced this idea? It obviously came from a fear that was not instilled by conscious deliberation. The morbid thought suddenly overcame him, and it had a power of its own that he could not control. It was far more difficult for this educated man to make an admission of this kind than would have been for a primitive to say that he was plagued by a ghost. The malign influence of evil spirits is at least an admissible hypothesis in the primitive culture, but it is a shattering experience for a civilized person to admit that his troubles are nothing more than a foolish prank of the imagination. The primitive phenomena of obsession has not vanished. It is the same as ever. It is only interpreted in a different and more obnoxious way. So, what's being explained here is there is a huge disconnect of certain people with the spirit world, while with others there's a natural attraction to the spirit world. And the spirit world is far more different than the mechanical world. This is the difference in people. This is the difference in cultures. When you don't believe that spirits exist, when you only believe in the mundane temporal existence, you become like the doctor, confused and tormented. Some things were created and they torment, and some things just are and they guide. And we misinterpret these spiritual concepts for something more mechanized. So when we lay down at night, we may sleep more peaceably. Let me read a little more. Two further visualizations of spirits. The top. Hellish demons descend on St. Anthony, a painting by the 16th century German artist Grunewald. Below, in the center, panel of a 19th century Japanese triptych. The ghost of a murdered man strikes down his killer. Ideological conflict breeds many of modern man's demons. To the right, a cartoon by America's Gahan Wilson depicts Khrushchev's shadow as a monstrous death machine. Far right, a cartoon from the Russian magazine Crocodile depicts the imperialist Western world as a devilish wolf being driven out of Africa by the flags of some newly independent African nations. This person does not see himself as existing in a real space, in a spiritual sense. His reflection is purely mechanical. All things mechanical were created as, like the machine in the reflection he sees of himself, this person, a creation. These people see themselves far more than their physical bodies, to the extent where they come back to seek revenge on those in this physical world who have harmed them. Their higher essence, their greater powers, the invisible, what's inside. Now you have a better understanding that all is not what it seems, and we are all not the same. Some were made, and some just are. I am that I am. Hear my truths. I am 7.